Well, good morning. It's been a great day already, hasn't it? Well, we are in the middle of this sermon series that we're doing on C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, this classic book. I hope that you're reading it. You know what? It's never too late. If you haven't started, pick up a copy, get one off of Amazon, buy one from our church, take the one you have on your shelf, start reading through it. There are some great passages in there that made a huge difference in my life. But I want to start by reading to you from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19. Listen for the word of God. He, being Jesus, entered into Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not see because he was short in stature. And so he ran ahead and he climbed a sycamore tree to see him because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." And so he hurried down and was happy to welcome him. All who saw it began to grumble and said, "He, Jesus, has gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner?" Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much." And Jesus said to him, "Today, salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost." Please pray with me. Lord, be with the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts this morning, that they may be your words and your heart and your surprising message for us this morning. Through Jesus Christ, who is our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. I feel like I've been a little bit devious with you these last couple of weeks. The titles of my sermon last week, I don't know if you remember, was "Is Christianity Hard or Easy?" And I said the answer was, do you remember? Yes, right? And today we have another one of these trick questions. Does your faith trouble or comfort you? Because I think it is, for most of us, a progression that we go through. Isn't that right? We start off a little smugly comfortable in our lives. We think we're doing just fine. We look around, we think the world is just fine, everything is fine, we're doing good enough. But then sometimes, I think for most people, the seeds of faith, the foundation of this new life that we end up receiving in faith, is that we allow ourselves to start to feel a little bit troubled about who we are and what we're doing. We start to recognize the gap, this gap between what we say we believe and what we actually do, what it is that we try, the pretense, the veneer we try to put on for others, and what we actually see going on in our lives. And that gap causes this cognitive dissonance that is a part of our lives at all times. We push it, we try our best to push it under the surface, but it's always back there, isn't it? Telling us that things aren't quite what they seem. And so we end up troubled. And then when we face that trouble, when we're willing to step into that trouble, when we're willing to look at it head on, then sometimes it ends up with us receiving the love and the grace and the unconditional love and acceptance of Jesus Christ. And faith comes into our life, and suddenly we are given a comfort like we have never, ever known before. There is a comfort that we can't even begin to describe as we start to feel reconnected to the things that are most real and most true, both in our lives and in the universe. And there is this incredible joy that comes along with that. But then it isn't long until what? We're back to being troubled. Isn't that right? It doesn't take long before we start realizing that we're not changing as fast as we'd like to be changing. We're not letting go of some of these things as easily or as thoroughly as we thought we would be letting them go. And it's not just us. We begin getting troubled by the things that are going on around us, because once we have received this grace and this love into our life, all of a sudden we realize not only are we God's precious children, but everyone on the face of this planet is God's precious child as well. And so suddenly we become troubled about that things are not all right in this world. We become troubled over injustice, and disease, and poverty, and homelessness, and hunger. We become troubled over things that aren't working well, over war and politics and brokenness in our homes and in our countries and our nations and our societies. And suddenly we start to care again. I've heard it said that to become a Christian is to experience everything that much more intensely, that to be a Christian is to experience joy, sweeter joys than ever before, but also to feel incredible sorrow, and to feel sorrow like never before. As Jay Kessler, the old president of InterVarsity, put it, to become a Christian is to allow your heart to break with the things that break the heart of God. And so it's this progression that we go through from comfortable to troubled to comforted and back to troubled again. And then it just starts over and over. I love the way that C.S. Lewis puts it on page 25 of Mere Christianity. He says, I quite agree that the Christian religion is, in the long run, a thing of unspeakable comfort. But it does not begin in comfort. It begins in the dismay I have been describing. And it is no use at all trying to go on to that comfort without first going through that dismay. In religion, as in war and everything else, comfort is the one thing you cannot get by looking for it. If you look for truth, you may find comfort in the end. If you look for comfort, you will not get either comfort or truth. Only soft soap and wishful thinking to begin with, and then in the end, despair. Interesting, isn't it? You know, when I was young, I used to think that I was a pretty amazing volleyball player. I was by far the best volleyball player of my little group of friends. There were 4 of us. When I went off to college, I played a semester in college for my little Christian Division III school. Then when I was lifeguarding at my itsy bitsy beach in Cape May Point, New Jersey, I was the best one on the lifeguard patrol. I was the best one up and down the entire Strand. And in fact, I thought I was pretty amazing. I thought I was the Mac Daddy of volleyball, and it was just even confirmed when, I don't know if you remember the actor Matt Dillon, you know, kind of the broody, rebellious, tough guy of my generation, sort of the James Dean of my crowd when I was growing up. Well, he came one summer to Cape May Point, and he rented a house, and we kind of got to know him during that week. And one day he asked if he could play volleyball with us after work got out, and so we said sure. And he was on the other team, and at one point I got up and I spiked the ball down onto his head, leaving one of those Akasum tattoos. You know what that is? The Mikasa ball print when it hits there and it leaves the tattoo. And that sealed the deal. I was legendary after that. Up and down the beach with this actor. Well, about a year or 2 later, I was in South Africa and doing my internship there. And one of the things I did while I was there is I lifeguarded at Clifton Beach, which is the very sort of fancy, la-di-da beach in really for the whole continent of Africa. And so when an international volleyball tournament was coming through South Africa, there was no question that it was going to take place on our beach, on Clifton Beach. And so the organizers of this tournament decided that they probably ought to invite the lifeguard patrol to be part of this professional volleyball tournament. And so they said that they could submit a team. And of course, the lifeguard patrol there asked me. Well, of course they would, right? I mean, first of all, I was an American, and every American knows how to play volleyball, and they knew that I had played some college volleyball. I wasn't a professional, but really that didn't matter because I was a legend in my own mind. And so they paired me up with the other best South African volleyball player on our beach patrol, who really wasn't very good either. And so we practiced, and we thought we were something else. I mean, for about 2 months we practiced. By the time the tournament came around, we were feeling sorry for these other professional teams that thought that they were going to take us on. And so I remember the very first match that we played, we were actually a little disappointed because we got linked up with one of the weakest teams in the entire event, and we thought, okay, well, we'll just use this as warm up, and then we'll get on to the real stuff. I will never forget that very first serve when they served it to me. My arms haven't stopped hurting since then. I couldn't believe what I didn't know. I think the entire match we got something like 3 points, and that was when they hit the ball into the net. And you would think that that would be kind of humiliating and disappointing and embarrassing and disillusioning, and it really was all of that. It was. But at the very same time, the moment that I walked off of that court, I had the most incredible sense of exhilaration. I had this incredible sense of freedom that finally, for once, I had played with the big boys. I had measured myself against what real volleyball looks like. And yes, I came up lacking, but it was this incredible sense of empowerment and freedom just to know that I wasn't playing a charade anymore. I wasn't pretending that I was hot stuff amongst a bunch of people who had no idea how to play volleyball. And it was this unbelievably comforting feeling. There is this progression that we go through from smugly comfortable to troubled to comforted and back to troubled and so on as we walk through our Christian faith. It was the exact same thing for our little friend Zacchaeus. There's a number of things we know about Zacchaeus from the Bible. One, we know that he was short. The Bible tells us he was. I love the way that the Bible puts it so delicately. Short in stature, right? We know that he was wealthy. The Bible also says that, and it makes perfect sense. He was a tax collector, and tax collectors back in those days were wealthy. In fact, he was the chief tax collector and in the province of Jericho, and Jericho was one of the wealthiest towns in the region at that time. It was right at the crossroads of going up and down the Jordan River. Anybody coming to Jerusalem from the east would go through Jericho. There was a lot of money in Jericho. The way that this whole tax collecting thing worked back in those days is really quite interesting. Rome would break up its entire empire into provinces, and they would come up with an amount of money that they expected to be collected in each of those provinces, and then they would put it out to tax collectors to bid on each province. And so the more a tax collector said he would give on top, whoever bid the most would get that, and then they would be given the green light to go out and raise as much taxes as they could through intimidation, manipulation, threatening, whatever it took. And everything that they raised above what they had promised and pledged to Rome, they would get to keep for themselves. Now, it was a great way of getting rich, but it was not a good way of making friends. And so the one other thing we do know about Zacchaeus is he was despised. I mean, first of all tax collectors were despised. They were seen as the flunkies of the occupying army. They were also seen as a little bit like Tony Soprano, right? And so we know that Zacchaeus was wealthy. We know that he was short. We know that he must have been pretty shrewd and intimidating. And we know that he was despised. I don't know who you're picturing in your mind, but I can't get Danny DeVito from Taxi out of mine. And it says, the other thing we know why he knew that he was despised, and we just have to go by inference, but it says in the Bible that he comes and he wants to see Jesus, but he can't because he's short and there's a big crowd. Now, I'm 6'3", and I love being tall, but there's certain things that just kind of come with the territory. Anytime there's a picture, I'm going to be in the back row, right? Anytime I'm watching a parade, I know my job. I know the drill. I'm the one supposed to step back and say, oh, please, go in front of me. Please, please, go in front of me. You know how I can tell that Zacchaeus was despised? How he could tell he was despised? Is when he came in, what happened? People stood a little closer together, puffed themselves out, stood up really tall. Nobody said, Zacchaeus, come in front of me. And so it says that he went and he climbed up into a sycamore tree, right? If you had been listening to the story, if we were telling this back in Jesus' day, everybody would have gone, ah. Because the sycamore tree, back in those days in that part of the world, it was the greenest, fullest, leafiest tree of all. Lots of low, thick branches, lots of big green leaves. Sycamore tree was the perfect place if you wanted to hide. And Zacchaeus wanted to hide. That is so often the seeds of our faith. It's the beginning of something happening, isn't it? When we realize that we're hiding. That we're hiding from others, that we're hiding from God, that we're hiding from ourselves. You know, it is a precarious predicament with the human condition. From the time we're little, we are taught to hide things, cover things up, to wear masks, to try to pretend that we're something that we're not. Anytime we make a mistake, to try to fend off and pretend and deflect to a Kendall pivot. Is that what you said yesterday? This is who we are. I'm just flabbergasted watching all of these scandals unravel with Bob Filner in San Diego and Anthony Weiner in New York. And can I just say, what a shame that that is his name with that kind of a scandal. But the thing that really blows me away is I think, why aren't these guys just being a lot more forthright and honest and repentant? Wouldn't they win a lot more admiration from us as the electorate if they would just be really honest and upfront and forward about it? I mean, especially Anthony Weiner, when he knows that there's more pictures that are going to be coming out, and yet still they're so defiant. They don't admit to anything. They deny everything up and down. What is going on? And if these guys have some of the smartest political minds behind them giving them advice, what are they thinking? I think they know what they're thinking. I think that they know that we would rather have someone who is strong and invincible, who never shows any weakness, who never admits to any mistakes. I think they know that more people are going to vote for someone like that because of our human condition than we are for someone who's open and vulnerable and honest. Isn't it true? And so, Zacchaeus is up there. He knows he's allowing himself to see who he is. He knows that he's despised. He knows what he's doing. He's a good Jew. He reads the Bibles. He knows the gap between his life of who he wants to be and who he is, of what he pretends to be and what he allows other people to see and who he actually is. So by the time Jesus comes up and looks up into the tree and finds him in his hiding place and calls out his name, Zacchaeus, come on down. I'm supposed to stay with you today. Something changes. You know, the scholars have always argued and debated, what was it? You know, when Zacchaeus comes down, Jesus goes over to his house for lunch. What was it that Jesus said to Zacchaeus to cause this complete turnaround, this complete change in heart? Was it some of his parables? Was it some of his teachings? Boy, we would have liked to have seen what he had said. But you know, I'm not sure that Jesus needed to say anything at that point. I think Zacchaeus was at a place where he was willing to face up to his gap, where he was willing to see where his actions didn't align with his beliefs. And then all it took was seeing Jesus' face. I mean, isn't it like that at times? Mother Teresa tells a great story about how she got into the life that she got into. She was in Calcutta one time. She saw a man dying and suffering in the gutter with worms and sores all over his body, and she knelt down to help him. And as she tried to pick him up, she said that all of a sudden it was as if his face had been transformed into the face of Jesus Christ. And that's all it took for Mother Teresa to become who she became. I think that Zacchaeus was ready. I think that he had been troubled for some time in his spirit about this gap. And the moment that Jesus was willing to come to his hiding place, to call his name, all he had to do was look into that loving, gracious face, and everything changed. He realized, you know what, I'm not good enough, but that's okay. I am not living up to who I say I am or who I want to be, but I am still loved and accepted. And it changed everything for him. And how long did that comfort, incredible comfort, last? Seems like it didn't last much longer than lunch. Because by the time lunch is over, his mind's churning, and he's saying, okay, God, I'm sorry about everything I've done. Right now, I'm going to give half of everything I own to the poor, and if I've cheated anyone, I'm going to pay them back fourfold. Because that's what happens, isn't it? We receive this incredible comfort as we realize that we are not who we think we are. And that's okay as we receive the love and we receive the grace. We receive this incredible comfort, but then before long, we start getting what some people call this divine dissatisfaction. As we then start looking around the world and realizing there is so much to be done, and so much that I need to do in my life, and so much that I need to do in this world. And we enter the dance, back and forth, between comfort and troubled, comforted and troubled. When I was growing up, I used to teach this sailing course at our little River Rats sailing club just down the street from my house. And when we would untie the boats and we were waiting to get the kids in the boats, we would line them up. And the way we'd hold them together is we would stand with one foot in each boat, and we, with our knees, try to kind of keep them from going apart. And that's what it's like, isn't it? We enter this faith, and suddenly we find ourselves with one foot in each boat, finding this indescribable kind of comfort, and allowing ourselves to be troubled by the things that are going on around us. We decide that we want real life. We want to measure ourselves against the real standard. We don't want to play with the amateurs anymore. We want to be in the professional game. And we realize that we fall far short, but there is an incredible exhilaration in being willing to say, yes, I want to be perfect like you're perfect, Jesus. This is what I want. This is what I need. And it all starts, John, when we're willing to get in the game. Amen.